Welcome to Stamps Old World UK, your trusted destination for the rich, colorful, and captivating world of vintage stamps. Today, we dive deep into the fascinating and ever-changing landscape of stamp market values in today's dollar, and we begin our journey with one of the most iconic and beloved issues from the early 20th century, the 20-cent Golden Gate stamp, issued by the United States Postal Service between 1922 and 1925. Whether you're a passionate philatelist, a casual collector, or someone curious about the hidden treasures lying in your attic, this video will give you valuable insights into how stamp values are determined today, what factors influence their price, and how you can assess the worth of your own collection in this modern digital age. The 20-cent Golden Gate stamp is more than just a piece of paper. It is a symbol of American history, culture, and maritime legacy. This stamp depicts a majestic scene of a sailing ship passing through the entrance of San Francisco Bay, famously known as the Golden Gate. Issued in a stunning carmine red shade, it was part of the fourth Bureau issue, a series that marked a transition in U.S. stamp design and production. But what makes this stamp truly intriguing is how its market value has evolved over the decades and how its worth can differ drastically depending on condition, rarity, centering, and whether it's mint or used. As of today, the market value of the 20-cent Golden Gate stamp in fine, used condition typically ranges from $500 to $1,000. However, a mint, never hinged example in very fine or superb condition can fetch anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, and in some cases, much more if graded or part of a historical collection. Stamps that are perfectly centered with pristine gum and no flaws are highly desirable to collectors and may command prices well above typical catalog listings. On the other hand, those with heavy cancellations, off-centering, or damage might only be worth a few cents despite their historical value. That's the delicate balance of stamp collecting. Condition is king, rarity adds weight, and provenance can tip the scale. Let's take a step back and understand what actually drives the value of any stamp in today's world. First and foremost, rarity is one of the most critical factors. A stamp that was printed in limited numbers or one that had limited circulation will naturally be more valuable than one that was mass-produced and widely used. In the case of the 20-cent Golden Gate stamp, it was relatively well circulated during its time, but examples in premium condition are becoming rarer each year as many have been lost, damaged, or degraded by time. This gradual decrease in high-quality examples makes them increasingly attractive to both private collectors and auction houses. Another major factor is demand. Just like in any market, if more people want a specific item, the price goes up. The demand for early 20th century U.S. stamps, especially from the Bureau issue period, remained strong among thematic collectors, historical enthusiasts, and investors alike. Stamps that feature iconic landmarks, maritime themes, or historical significance tend to retain and grow their value over time. The Golden Gate stamp, with its symbolic representation of westward expansion and naval trade, checks all of these boxes. But demand alone isn't enough. Condition is equally, if not more, important. This includes factors like whether the stamp is used or unused, how centered the design is within the margins, whether there are any tears or thins, and the quality of the gum on the back. A stamp that is poorly centered or has faults will be valued significantly lower than a flawless example. This is where professional grading can make a big difference. A certificate of authenticity and condition grading from a reputable organization such as the Philatelic Foundation or professional stamp experts can increase the value of your stamp and give buyers more confidence in a potential purchase. Now, let's touch upon modern trends and how the stamp market has changed in recent years. With the rise of online platforms such as eBay, HipStamp, and Delcamp, collectors now have access to a global market, allowing them to buy and sell stamps from anywhere in the world. This has led to increased transparency in pricing but also more competition. It is not uncommon to see the same stamp listed at widely different prices depending on the seller's expertise, the platform, and whether or not it is properly identified and described. For example, one seller might offer a used Golden Gate stamp for $3,000, while another lists a mint, graded version for over $15,000. This is why knowledge and research are essential for any serious collector today. In recent years, there has also been a surge in interest from investors looking for alternative assets, and vintage stamps have become part of this trend. While stamps are not as volatile or liquid as stocks or cryptocurrency, they offer a unique advantage, tangible history and emotional value. Some rare stamps have appreciated tremendously over the last few decades, and collectors who bought smart and preserved well are seeing significant returns today. While the 20-cent Golden Gate may not make you a millionaire, its consistent demand and historical charm make it a stable and interesting piece to include in any diversified philatelic portfolio. If you're new to collecting or thinking about selling, there are a few important tips to remember. Always handle your stamps with tongs, store them in protective mounts or stock books, and keep them away from humidity, direct sunlight, or fluctuations in temperature. Get your high-value items appraised or graded if possible, and educate yourself about the catalog numbers and current market prices by referring to trusted sources like the Scott Catalog, Stanley Gibbons, or specialized philatelic auction house listings. Being informed is your greatest tool in ensuring you don't undersell a gem or overpay for a common variety. Next up, the 20-cent James A. Garfield stamp. This isn't just a look at a stamp's face value or its catalog listing. Today, we're unpacking everything behind the green paper, the history, the art, the evolving market value in today's economy, and how it fits into both personal collections and broader philatelic investment trends. Whether you're a beginner wondering if your inherited stamp albums are worth something, or a dedicated philatelist expanding your Liberty issue lineup, this video will give you all the knowledge you need about this particular stamp and the state of its market value in modern-day dollars. Let's start with the history. The 20-cent James A. Garfield stamp belongs to the Liberty series, which was issued between 1954 and 1965 by the United States Postal Service. This series was significant because it marked a transition in American postal design, moving from ornate and classic layouts to cleaner, more modern aesthetics. Unlike earlier stamps that often carried allegorical figures, the Liberty issue focused on showcasing American presidents, political leaders, and historic buildings. The inclusion of President James A. Garfield in this series honored the 20th President of the United States, who served a tragically short term in 1881 before he was assassinated. Known for his intellect and vision, Garfield's image was memorialized in this green 20-cent stamp, with a fine engraved profile portrait and clean, minimalist typography that stood out from the earlier elaborate stamp designs. From a collector's perspective, the Garfield stamp is often one of the more recognizable issues from the Liberty series due to its unique green coloration and the high-value denomination. It was primarily used for heavier mail, international correspondence, and special postal services. Because of this, it saw practical, everyday use by businesses and individuals alike during the mid-20th century, which makes it relatively common in used condition today. However, as with many stamps, the real market value is determined by a mix of condition, rarity and grade, and collector demand. So, how much is this stamp worth in today's dollar market? As of today, a used 20-cent Garfield stamp in average condition usually trades for a modest amount, typically between 25 cents and $1,000. This might seem small, but remember, most used stamps from this era were never preserved, and many have flaws like creases, poor centering, heavy cancellations, or discoloration. If you happen to own a mint, never hinged example, meaning it was never mounted in an album and retains its full original gum, you can expect its base market value to range between $1,000 and $4,000, depending on how well it has been preserved. However, this is where condition and grading become critical. A high-grade mint Garfield stamp, certified and graded by a reputable authority like the Philatelic Foundation or professional stamp experts, can command much higher prices. A perfectly centered, pristine, mint never hinged Garfield stamp can be valued between $1,000 and $3,000 or more, particularly if it receives a top-tier grade like XF Superb 95 or 98. These are the examples that appeal to competitive collectors, who are building elite condition sets and are willing to pay a premium for top-quality pieces. One of the interesting nuances in the stamp collecting world is the gap between catalog value and market reality. The Scott Catalog may list the Garfield stamp at a certain price, but real-world sales often reflect the balance of supply and demand. For instance, while many sellers on eBay list mint Garfield stamps for $5,000 to $10,000, only those in exceptional condition, or those part of a full Liberty Series set, tend to sell at the higher end. And when these stamps are sold in full sheets or blocks of 4 with plate numbers, collectors may pay a premium of $30,000 to $50,000 or more, especially if the sheet is uncut, folded correctly, and preserved in archival conditions. Another area to consider when assessing this stamp's value is thematic collecting and historical significance. President Garfield is not as widely collected as Lincoln, Washington, or Roosevelt, but there are specific collectors who focus on U.S. presidential themes, assassination history, or Ohio-born leaders, for whom this stamp carries added sentimental or thematic value. And then there are those who collect Liberty Series stamps exclusively, aiming for every denomination in every variant, coils, sheet stamps, and plate blocks. The Garfield stamp, being a mid-denomination issue, plays a crucial part in completing such a collection, and scarcity in high grade can add to its appeal and price point. When looking at broader market trends, it's essential to understand how stamp collecting is changing in the 21st century. In recent years, we've seen a shift toward online stamp auctions, global marketplaces, and digital cataloging tools. Platforms like eBay, HipStamp, Delcamp, and Stamp Auction Network have transformed how collectors buy and sell, introducing competition and greater transparency in pricing. As a result, the stamp market today is both more accessible and more challenging. While you can reach buyers from around the world, you're also competing with thousands of other sellers, some of whom may not accurately grade or describe their listings. That's why clarity, authenticity, and high-resolution scans are so important when trying to sell stamps like the 20-cent Garfield. There's also a growing interest among alternative investors who see stamps as stable, tangible, long-term assets. While the Garfield stamp isn't rare enough to be considered an investment-grade stamp, like the inverted Jenny or the British Guiana 1-cent magenta, it still has a role in building entry-level investment portfolios. A well-preserved Liberty Series collection, professionally mounted and authenticated, could appreciate slowly over time, especially if stored properly and protected from moisture, light, and air exposure. The key with stamps like Garfield's is not instant wealth but preserving historical value over decades. So what should you do if you have this stamp in your collection? First, examine it under good lighting. Use a magnifying glass to check for flaws, gum disturbance, or discoloration. Compare it to grading guides or send it to a third-party grading service if you believe it's high quality. If you have multiple copies, consider selling the lower-quality ones and keeping the best examples. Or better yet, use it to start building a full Liberty Series collection, which is still very achievable today and is a great way to introduce younger collectors to the hobby. You can also organize your collection around U.S. presidents, postal history, or mid-20th century American design. At Stamps Old World UK, we believe that stamps like the 20-cent Garfield are more than just old pieces of paper. They are living documents of culture, politics, and communication. They are silent storytellers that have passed through time, witnessed generations, and held messages of love, business, and diplomacy. Whether it's worth $1 or $100, every stamp has a purpose in your collection, and every collector helps keep that purpose alive. To sum up, the 20-cent James A. Garfield stamp from the Liberty issue is currently valued at 25 cents to $30, depending on condition, rarity, and grade. While it's not a rare or extremely valuable stamp, its historical significance, design, and place in the Liberty series make it a cherished addition to many collections. As stamp collecting continues to evolve in the digital age, stamps like these offer a link to the past, one that's affordable, educational, and always intriguing. Next up, George C. Marshall, the man behind the Marshall Plan, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and one of the most respected military leaders and diplomats in modern U.S. history. Today, we'll uncover the full story behind the 20-cent George C. Marshall stamp, look at its historical significance, assess its current market value in today's dollar, and understand how it fits into both beginner and advanced philatelic collections. As always, this is your host at Stamps Old World UK, bringing you another comprehensive journey through time and postage. Let's begin with the stamp itself. The George C. Marshall 20-cent stamp was issued by the United States Postal Service on October 24, 1967. The stamp is part of the Prominent Americans series, a long-running definitive set that celebrated significant individuals who shaped American history in politics, arts, science, and military service. This particular stamp is rendered in a deep olive brown color and features an engraved portrait of Marshall with a stern, determined expression, a fitting tribute to his legacy as both a statesman and a soldier, as the stamp's vertical inscriptions clearly proclaim. George C. Marshall was not just another military figure. As Chief of Staff of the United States Army during World War II, he played a key role in organizing the U.S. war effort and later served as Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense under President Harry Truman. Most notably, he was the architect of the Marshall Plan, the economic aid program that helped rebuild Western Europe after the devastation of World War II. For this, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1953, making him one of the few military leaders in history to be honored for peace. His influence on global recovery, diplomacy, and military organization was monumental, and the 20-cent stamp bearing his name and face reflects that legacy with elegance and simplicity. Now let's turn our attention to the market value of this stamp in today's collector economy. The George C. Marshall 20-cent stamp, like many stamps from the 1960s definitive series, was issued in large quantities and used widely for higher domestic rates and international letters. Because of this, it is not considered rare in used condition, and the average price for a used single example typically ranges from $100 to $500. However, its value can increase significantly if you possess a mint, never hinged example, especially if the stamp is well centered, has no gum disturbance, and retains strong original color. In that case, the value may rise to $1,000 to $3,000 per stamp. For collectors focused on grading and high-performance philately, there is still more potential. A certified stamp in XF Superb 95 or higher condition can command prices between $1,000 and $2,500, especially if it's slabbed or accompanied by a recognized grading certificate. These high-end examples appeal to collectors who specialize in the prominent American series and who seek perfect examples of each face, including Marshall, Albert Einstein, Robert Frost, and others. There are also collectors who assemble entire plate blocks, line pairs, or booklet panes, which can fetch even higher prices in online auctions and philatelic expos, particularly when preserved in archival quality mounts or original mailing formats. When looking at larger philatelic trends, it's important to understand how the demand for these mid-20th century stamps is changing. With fewer people mailing letters and more collectors turning digital, the number of stamps being produced in physical form has decreased, making older definitive issues like the George C. Marshall 20-cent stamp more nostalgic and historically relevant. Collectors today are increasingly looking for post-World War II Americana, and this stamp fits squarely into that niche. Its themes of global leadership, diplomacy, and recovery make it attractive for thematic collectors interested in military history, peace studies, or United Nations-related subjects. Furthermore, one should not overlook the value of errors, misprints, and oddities, which always fetch premium prices in the collector's market. While no major national errors are widely known for the George C. Marshall 20-cent stamp, occasional examples of color shifts, tagging errors, or missing inscriptions have appeared in local sales and can be worth significantly more, sometimes up to $5,000 or $10,000 depending on rarity and authenticity. That's why careful examination under UV light or magnification is recommended when assessing your collection. Another point of value is in postal history usage. Stamps like these, when found on original envelopes, covers, or international airmail, can have enhanced worth depending on the route, date, and the addressee. For example, a George C. Marshall 20-cent stamp used on a Cold War-era letter to Europe or on military-related correspondence can offer additional historical context and may appeal to postal historians. Covers with military unit postmarks, government mail, or diplomatic pouches offer extra layers of collectability and can be sold for prices far above the value of a single stamp. So, what does all this mean for you, the collector or casual viewer holding onto this stamp? First, take pride in the fact that you are holding a piece of Cold War history, a silent tribute to one of the 20th century's most consequential figures. Next, assess the condition. Is it used or mint? Is it hinged or unhinged? Is it perfectly centered? Are the perforations clean and even? These small details make all the difference in determining value. If it's in excellent condition, consider having it graded or preserved properly in a protective album with acid-free pages. If you have multiples, look into building a full prominent American set, or a thematic album based on military leaders or Nobel Peace Prize winners. Next up, the 20-cent Bighorn sheep stamp. On the surface, it may appear to be just a simple wildlife stamp, but beneath its rugged portrait lies a story that weaves together art, environmental consciousness, philatelic design, and long-term collector value. Whether you're here to evaluate your stamp collection, expand your knowledge, or simply fall in love with stamp history, you're in the right place, because today, we leave no stone unturned. Let's start with the origins. The 20-cent Bighorn sheep stamp was issued in 1981 by the United States Postal Service as part of a special definitive series focused on American wildlife. At the time, there was a cultural shift in the United States and globally toward environmentalism, conservation, and ecological awareness. The Postal Service, in collaboration with wildlife artists and engravers, responded by issuing a number of stamps featuring native animals to celebrate the beauty and diversity of North America's natural world. This particular stamp, rendered in a bold black and white engraving, showcases the proud and muscular head of a bighorn sheep, a powerful symbol of strength, balance, and wilderness survival in North America's Rocky Mountains and high plains. The stamp's minimalist yet striking design is one of the reasons it continues to hold strong collector appeal decades after its release. Unlike commemorative stamps that are printed in short runs, this was a definitive stamp, intended for long-term everyday use. That meant millions were printed and circulated, primarily used for standard postage rates on domestic and light international letters. The stamp's clean, modern look, and fierce animal portrait made it stand out in everyday mailboxes, capturing public imagination. Even though it was widely used, the Bighorn sheep stamp rose in popularity among collectors almost immediately, especially among those interested in wildlife, North American fauna, and topical collections centered on the natural world. In terms of design and engraving, the Bighorn sheep stamp is a true example of how simplicity can produce great visual power. The artist behind the stamp created intricate horn curls and intense eyes using only black ink, a masterclass in contrast and shading. The absence of color actually works in the stamp's favor, giving it a boldness and directness that commands attention. This simplicity in design also means that flaws and misprints are more visible, which is part of why pristine mint versions of this stamp are more desirable than their used counterparts. The black ink on white paper exaggerates smudges, paper fibers, and cancellations, meaning that clean, mint, never-hinged copies are especially sought after by condition-focused collectors. Let's talk about what most of you are here for, the current market value of the 20-cent Bighorn sheep stamp in today's collector economy. If you have a used copy, meaning one that was postally used and bears a cancellation mark, the value is typically modest, ranging between 100 and 500 cents depending on how well it's been preserved. Used stamps with heavy cancellations or poor centering may only be worth face value, while lightly cancelled, well-centered copies might edge closer to $1 when sold in bulk or included in thematic lots. But the real interest lies in mint-condition stamps, particularly those that are never hinged, well-centered, and free from gum disturbance or discoloration. A single mint, never-hinged copy of the Bighorn sheep stamp typically sells for between $1,000 and $3,000, especially on platforms like eBay, Hipstamp, and Delcamp. However, prices can rise when the stamp is sold as part of a block of 4, a plate number strip, or an uncut sheet. These blocks or plate blocks, particularly when they display symmetrical margins and full selvage, can fetch prices ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, and more if they are graded or come from a particularly well-centered sheet. In some instances, full sheets of 100 in mint condition have sold for upwards of $9,000 to $19,000, depending on presentation and collector interest at the time. Collectors who specialize in wildlife stamps, North American mammals, or ecology-themed collections often seek this stamp to complete thematic exhibits. Because of that, demand remains stable, especially among collectors building specialized albums. The Bighorn sheep stamp is also featured prominently in wildlife conservation exhibitions and postal history displays from the 1980s. It is often grouped alongside other U.S. stamps from the period featuring grizzly bears, bald eagles, and endangered species, forming what many consider the golden age of American wildlife stamp design. But the story doesn't end with condition and catalog value. There's another level to collecting this stamp, and that's variety and rarity. Like many definitive stamps printed in large numbers, the Bighorn sheep stamp was subject to different print runs, paper types, and tagging methods. Some collectors have identified minor printing varieties such as ink shift, misperforations, double impressions, and tagging anomalies. While none of these errors are cataloged as major national rarities, small varieties and printing differences can still command premiums from specialist collectors, sometimes bringing in prices of $10,000 to $50,000 depending on visibility and documentation. Also worth noting is the growing interest in postal history surrounding this stamp. The Bighorn sheep stamp, when found on original cover, especially envelopes sent from rural post offices, wildlife reserves, or first day of issue events, can hold greater collector interest. A first day cover, FDC, with this stamp, postmarked on the date of its official release, typically sells for $50,000 to $75,000, more if it features a hand-drawn or limited edition cachet. And if the envelope carries historical significance, such as use by a wildlife foundation or mailed from a conservation summit, then the value can be even higher. In the world of philately, provenance and storytelling often elevate monetary value. From an investment perspective, this stamp is not considered a high-yield asset like rare inverted errors or early British colonial issues. However, as part of a broader collection, especially one that's carefully curated and maintained, the Bighorn sheep stamp contributes to long-term appreciation. Many collectors today are treating stamps as tangible historical documents, and themed collections with solid narratives tend to increase in value over time, especially as younger generations rediscover the tactile joy of postal history. This makes the Bighorn sheep stamp a solid mid-range piece for anyone investing in wildlife philately or U.S. definitive issues. If you happen to own this stamp, or a batch of them, what should you do next? First, sort them by condition: used, mint hinged, mint never hinged. Evaluate the centering, gum quality, and perforation. For high-quality pieces, consider mounting them in archival-safe albums using acid-free stamp mounts. If you suspect your copy may be an error or plate variety, consult a stamp expert or submit it to a professional philatelic society for evaluation. And if you're a thematic collector, try building a North American wildlife showcase, pairing this stamp with others like the 22-cent bobcat, the 29-cent Canada goose, and the 33-cent black bear. The Bighorn sheep can serve as the rugged centerpiece of such a collection. At Stamps Old World UK, we believe every stamp is a snapshot of a bigger story, a story about people, places, nature, design, communication, and human progress. The 20-cent Bighorn sheep stamp is a perfect example of how postage can reflect national pride, conservation ideals, and artistic beauty all at once. It may not be rare in quantity, but it is priceless in what it represents: the majesty of nature, the commitment to preserving it, and the role of stamps in spreading awareness long before hashtags and viral campaigns existed. In closing, the 20-cent Bighorn sheep stamp from 1981 is valued today between $1,000,000 and $30,000 individually depending on condition, with blocks and covers reaching $15 to $25, and full sheets or rare varieties occasionally fetching more. It remains a beloved item in U.S. definitive collections and is a standout piece in any wildlife or conservation-themed philatelic exhibit. Whether you're a long-time collector, a casual hobbyist, or someone just starting out, this stamp is a worthy addition, not just for its value in dollars, but for its enduring symbolism and clean, timeless design. Thank you for joining us here at Stamps Old World UK, your trusted companion in the world of classic and modern philately. If you enjoyed this detailed breakdown, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications so you never miss another in-depth stamp exploration. Coming soon, we'll feature rare British War-era issues, undervalued colonial gems, and more American wildlife classics. Until next time, keep collecting, keep learning, and remember, every stamp is a story, and every story deserves to be told.